All right, today is April 12, 2018. This is the meeting of the Kubernetes Special Interest Group. We have a lot on the agenda today, so let's go ahead and get started. First up, we have a presentation from Tim Alclair and the security team. Unfortunately, Jordan has a family emergency, so he's not able to be with us today. This is presenting the empty dir and subpath postmortem. Tim, do you want to take it away?
Sure. I haven't prepared for this at all, but I can kind of talk through a little bit.
If you want, you can pull up the other doc.
Sure. Or actually, would you be interested in presenting the storage one?
Sure.
Storage, or was that a separate item?
I don't think there's a separate item for it, but yeah, we can pull up the original doc.
Yeah, I can maybe run through the original. Okay. So yeah, we're talking about two CVEs here. Can I assume that everyone is familiar with these, or
good to jog folks' memories?
Sure. So the first 121.01 is a vulnerability where a subpath that mounts a symlink. That symlink is resolved in the root namespace on the host. And this means that a subpath with any volume type can be used to mount an arbitrary host directory into that volume. So if you control the pod spec, this is a pretty serious vulnerability, especially if you're expecting something like pod security policy to protect from exploits like this. Even if the attacker doesn't control the pod spec, if there is a pod that mounts the subpath in one container and not in the other, and the attacker gains full control of both, that's kind of a pretty roundabout way, and we consider that lower severity, but they could trigger this. The second one is with specific to atomic writer volumes. And in this one, again, symlinks can be used to trick the kubelet into deleting files, arbitrary files on the host outside of the volume. As for timeline, this was reported right at the end of November in 2017. It took us a while to settle on the final fix. And thanks a lot to everyone who was more active on developing those fixes. I don't think we need to go too detailed into the specific timeline here. I will note that our release infrastructure is not set up well to deal with security releases right now. And so even though we have this private security repo, we still need to build the releases out of the public repo, which meant that on March 12th, the actual release day, there was a lot of kind of running around trying to get the patches merged and then the releases built as quickly as possible. So that's something we're working on.
Hey, one comment on that. The security repo, we had a series of regressions after the fix merged. And, after it merged, we lost access to the repo and some of the history, which kind of caused some problems. I don't know how we can address that going forward. I know that there's a need to, have limited exposure to who sees that repo. Mm-hmm. But it was definitely an issue, fixing regressions that were caused by this fix.
So what I'm hearing is kind of maybe two separate pieces there. One is you'd like to be able to see like the conversation history on the discussions that were happening in private. Is that right?
Yes.
And
After
the
the
other
fact.
piece is a little more what we're hoping to talk about today is how we might have prevented some of these regressions with better test coverage. I think one of the problems is we weren't running, if I remember correctly, we weren't running the entire test suite in the security repo, is that right?
Most of the regressions that happened did not have test coverage,
Okay.
so it wouldn't have really helped.
As for getting access to the conversations, I don't know if GitHub has any way of us kind of transferring those PRs over, but we could talk about maybe just publishing a log of those conversations. Yeah, I will take note of that, but I'm not going to promise anything right now.
Thanks.
So let's see, what went well? We were able to get E2E testing set up on the security repo. I guess we got everything running eventually.
Yeah, all the pull jobs were able to run.
But not the CI jobs, right?
Not the CI
and
jobs.
So there are a lot of tests that we only run in CI.
Yeah, but we did manually run like CI stuff manually.
Okay, got it. Yeah, a lot of this is talking about the release process, and so I don't think we need to go into that in too much detail here.
Should we switch back?
Yeah, so I think we should switch back over to the storage one now.
Okay. I can now go over the kind of dev side of the Postmortem. So from the dev side, what went well, we were able to do shared development and testing of the fix across time zones, and we were able to split up the work and be able to do a lot of things in parallel. We added a lot of test cases for the subpath feature. Previously, the subpath feature had very minimal test cases to begin with, so we added like almost 100 more test cases. And I guess, you know, even though we added so many new test cases, we still ended up having regressions at the end. I guess I want to go into more detail about each regression and kind of see like where we were missing some test coverage and maybe consider like how in the future we can make sure all our new features and bug fixes also have adequate test coverage. Okay. So I have this table here of all the regressions that occurred. I think there were a total of, what is this, 8 regressions, 3 of which I would consider serious. So we can start from, I guess, most serious to least. This first regression basically meant using subpath with config map secret downward all the atomic volumes just didn't work outright. And we were obviously missing very basic tests there. When we were developing the fix, we focused mostly on all the persistent volume types. Like, well, we did empty dir, we did host path, and then we did all the persistent volume in-tree types like cluster and NFS and GCPD and all that, but we completely just like overlooked the atomic writer volumes. That was unfortunate.
When you say the persistent volume types, were those tested both as persistent volumes and as
inline. Yeah, we had tests for both the PVC versions and the directly specified volumes. The second, and the other kind of funny thing to note about atomic volumes is that the using subpath with atomic volumes is already not great, even before the fix, because those subpath mounts didn't actually get any of the API updates from the secret objects or config maps anyway. So that was already sort of a known limitation of using it. The second major regression was that the subpath cleanup didn't work if you mounted the subpath as a file. I think most commonly we were focused on subpath as a directory instead of as a file. So we were missing. Well, we did have tests that test subpath as a file, but they did not cover pod deletions, so the test did not detect that issue. That was the main missing coverage there. And then the third major regression was that the FS group settings were not set up correctly. So if you use the FS group feature, then your application would not be, your container would not be able to come up because it would have permission issues. Let's see. And for that issue, we actually do have FS group tests, but they were under the feature tag. They're not run. All right, the next few.
Are those run in CI?
Yeah, they're run in CI, but it has the feature tag.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I guess that means it's not run in CI.
Well, we have specific suites for some.
We don't have any
features.
suites that explicitly test this feature tag, but I think there isn't really a reason why we need the feature tag anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I think all our platforms do support FS group, so yeah, we just removed the feature tag.
We also the test was not enough actually. It did not test for GIDs, set GID bits. It's only test for the permission bits.
Oh, okay. All right, so the next three I would consider less serious because either they're kind of rare race conditions, they're covering rare race conditions, or there are workarounds that are possible. So this one is that the subpath mounts don't work if you mount a socket file. I think for the most part, most users will do something like host path to the Docker socket or something. That's usually done with host path volumes. So with host path volumes, you really don't need to use subpath with host path volumes because you could just specify the entire full path. So there was a simple workaround for that.
Isn't that a common way of communication across containers in a pod?
Using the Docker socket?
Or just using any, like an empty dir volume with a socket that gets created in.
Yeah, that's possible. So yeah, it's more than just host path where you might want to put a socket file in there, but I think the most common use cases will use host path. Okay. So let's see, the next regression was related around reconstruction. This one, because reconstruction is already a really small window of time to trigger, so I think this one was not as high priority, but still important to fix because it will, if you hit this condition, it will leave behind stale mounts. So for this issue, we do have We do have test cases to test reconstruction, but they did not test it with host path volumes. So that's one of the things where it's like you have some really rare race condition window you're testing, and you add in this other like kind of not default or common feature, and there's no test case for that. Let's see. So the remaining regressions are things we still have not fixed yet. These are actually like these are the hard problems. Luckily for us, most of the issues that we did fix were really easy to fix. The remaining issues that we have not fixed, we haven't fixed it because it's difficult to fix. But luckily, I think the impact of these bugs are either medium to low severity, so hopefully not as many users are impacted by these issues. This one is related to nesting subpath mounts inside atomic volumes. I think this is related to the change we did for the second CVE, the atomic writer deletion problem. As part of that, we had to make atomic volumes read only. So as a consequence of that, if you had a nested volume inside an atomic volume, and that path did not exist, you wouldn't be able to nest. We couldn't create the directory and mount things to it afterwards. So to get around that, the atomic writer code actually walks through all the volume mounts in the container spec and tries to pre-create the directories for the mount points, nested mounts. But the issue with that is, so the main issue with that is that it can only create directories for it, or it assumes that the mounts are going to be directories. So if you actually want to mount a file, then that's not going to work, because when we try to bind mount a file to a directory, the bind mount's going to fail because its source and target are not the same type. This is a really hard issue to fix because we need to basically we need to predict what type of volume mount other volumes are going to be. Are they going to be a file or a directory? I'm not sure if we can really do this without some hint from the API or the user. So I think fixing this will require an API change probably. The next issue is reconstruction of host path. So before, we never needed to care about reconstruction of host path because host path was just a direct pass-through of the given path to the container runtime. But now for subpath, now that we do these intermediate bind mounts, now cleanup of host path actually matters, and kubelet needs to be made aware of it. I think fixing this will either require reconstruction to specifically look for host path subpaths, or making host path sort of more like the other volume types that bind mount stuff to varlet kubelet. So this is another potentially big change. I would consider.
Sorry, is this around if you use a host path with a subpath?
With a subpath.
That we don't properly check that the subpath is mounted within the host path?
So reconstruction is a window to the window that it addresses is if a pod gets force deleted while kubelet is down.
Okay.
So it's a way, reconstruction is a way for the kubelet volume manager to read the mount state from the disk and kind of figure out what leftover mounts were still there. So originally with host path because we never managed mounts for host path. It didn't matter. But now that we are creating, if you use subpath with host path, we are now creating a bind mount for the subpath. So now it's important that we actually clean up the subpath mounts. Again, I would consider this lower priority because both reconstruction window is small and also you could just not use subpath with host path as a workaround. And then this last issue is host path subpaths don't work in containerized kubelet. This is actually sort of, it's a functional issue, a major functional issue, but it also didn't already work completely properly before the subpath fix. It was already kind of broken before. So that's why I also consider this sort of low priority, and you can always work around this by not using subpath. So out of all these regressions, there were some common themes that I sort of picked out. Major common theme is that, we have a lot of missing test coverage for things, but I'm not sure, it might be part of a broader issue in that we just have so many features and different behaviors and all these different volume plugins that it's just the combinations of all of the features interacting together across different volume types. It's just impossible to really cover, to think about it and cover all of them. But I guess maybe one major coverage that we are missing in general is the containerized kubelet environment. That's just not, it's just not there. So yeah, going to action items, I came up with a few, but I think I'd like to open it up to the SIG to also think about how we can kind of improve the process here. I guess some immediate actions that we probably need to take. We need to find owners for the remaining bugs. I would consider that kind of high priority. The other high priority action item is we need to find an owner for containerized kubelets. And then maybe some longer term items are to look into E2E testing framework. Writing some sort of E2E testing framework that we can test just common features across multiple volumes easily, instead of having to explicitly spell out every single volume type and the feature.
Michelle, a couple of questions on the testing. It's one of those things we could go in and over-engineer it and try to figure out all of the test touch points that exist and guess and speculate where the things are going to go on. But it's one of these unknown things, right? We don't really know what storage touch points are going to break with a fix or with a bug without stepping in it first. And
I agree. That's the general issue that we just have so many combinations we can't possibly think of and test them all. But is there anything we can do to make things easier in any way? For example, the subpath feature originally only had test cases for empty dirt and host path volumes. There were no test cases for any of the other volume types. Kind of things like that. Are there general features that we are only testing against a subset of volumes that could benefit from being tested against more?
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I agree with that. I think there are some basic combinations where it's a mount feature paired with all or representative set of volume types. And then I'm wondering if we could have kind of our broad representative set of volumes, and then a narrower set of like, these are sort of the like classes of volumes, like here's an atomic writer, here's an ephemeral, here's a persistent, here's a block or whatever, and have that small set that we dive deeper into like more nuanced combinations.
Yeah. I think that would.
So the issues that we identified, like the regressions that actually occurred, did we create test cases to cover all of those scenarios?
Yes. Every single fix, we made sure there are test cases for them.
So to me, that's like the most important thing moving on, is like when we find something, create a test case and make sure that we have a test case for it.
Yes.
Like that.
Definitely, like, as just like, those are kind of like the 3 items I have here. It's just like going forward for any bug fixes or features, we have to make sure there is adequate test coverage for it. But then there's also like, is there anything we can do to also prevent things, you know?
Okay.
I'll have a better answer for the containerized kubelet next week. I've raised that up to our management, and they are going to discuss and come back to me.
Cool. And for the remaining open bugs, do we want to try to assign owners here? Are there any volunteers interested in helping work on them? Okay, then we'll take it offline and try to find some owners for those bugs. And I think this idea of having a end-to-end storage framework that makes it easy to test multiple different types of volume plugins at once is useful.
This would be useful for CSI as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you just have a general framework that like tests mounting and reading and writing,
yep,
you can just like plug in any CSI plugin you want,
yep,
and test it.
Yeah.
Let's be frank here. We weren't able to do this until we had mount propagation, right? Like this has been our dream for 2 years, is to have end-to-end tests that cover all the volume types, and mount propagation was a key piece of that. So now that that's in place, we can go a little bullish on it.
Yep.
All right, cool. Thank you.
One piece, I'm not sure sorry if I missed this earlier, but so there was a decision kind of early on to make the atomic writer volumes read-only. We sort of decided that was the intended behavior of those volume types, and made that change. And I agree with that decision for kind of like the long-term direction. But I think it was problematic that we didn't have any workaround. Our workaround was kind of like, well, turn off the feature and, you know, be vulnerable. Is there a way that we could have fixed the vulnerability without making those read-only, and then say waited until 110 to make the switch, when users would have more of a heads up and a little more like, you know, hey, this is coming, like,
yeah,
you know, be very conscious about.
I think there were 2 parts to the atomic writer volume fix. Right? The first part, I think, was the one that actually fixed the deletion issue. And then the second part,
it's
making
preemptively,
it was like
prevent other issues.
Yeah.
So I think
the read-only one was the one that was preemptive, or was the actual
preemptive?
Okay.
I think the first fix that went in actually fixed the issue about files getting deleted, and then the second one was just like this is better.
Yeah.
Kind of.
So we could have probably broken that into 2 pieces and had the read-only go out at 110.
Yeah.
That's a good takeaway.
Yeah, so I think going forward, we need to think like, we're kind of always thinking about backwards compatibility, but I think sometimes we can get caught up in the like kind of security, like fix the vulnerabilities. And I think it's important to remember that we need to take backwards compatibility almost more seriously in the case of security incident, because users don't have the same freedom to just delay the upgrade in that case.
Absolutely. All right, so a lot of great takeaways from these regressions, from the subpath fix. I think top on everybody's mind going forward should be please make sure that your new features that are coming out are thoroughly tested. That can go a long way to help prevent a lot of these issues. And then, of course, the list of issues that Michelle outlined here. Okay, we're going to keep moving forward. If you have any more questions on this, please reach out to Michelle or Tim or Jordan.
Saad, just one quick thing on the previous section. This is Kiran from OpenEBS.
Sure.
One of the action items was to audit the E2E test. Not super familiar with the current functionality, but that's something kind of interesting to me to look at so that I can also get familiar with the functionality.
Awesome.
I'll probably put my name there, and then I'll reach out on the Slack to get some help to get that done.
Yeah, you can reach out to me. I'm pretty familiar with how the E2B tests, where they are and how they work. So,
thanks, Michelle.
All right, thank you very much. Next up, we have design reviews. Mike Denise has a proposal for service account token volume projection. Mike, you want to take it away? I'll go ahead and stop sharing and you can share your screen.
Yeah, sure. Just a second. Can you guys all see that?
Yep.
So this is a proposal that Clayton and Liggett and I wrote. In 1.10, we had a new API called the Token Request API go to alpha. It's actually linked from the summary. Basically, what the API allows is for clients of the Kubernetes API to request tokens from the API server. These tokens are very similar to the current service account tokens, but they have some notable improvements in that they are time-bound, meaning they expire rapidly. They can expire rapidly. They are audience-bound, meaning they can be scoped to a specific recipient. So they can be sent to potentially Vault or an extension API server without being usable against the Kubernetes API. And they are pod-bound, meaning that we can actually attach their lifetimes to the lifetime of a pod. Some of the motivation of this work was to replace the current mechanism of distribution of service account tokens. It's problematic from a security perspective because they are extremely difficult to rotate. I am not sure if anybody's rotating these rapidly or at all in the wild. I've actually tried to rotate the current service account tokens before, and I've filed a bunch of bugs that resulted. So it's definitely not tested. They also require they actually have some scalability issues. Previously, the secret gets were a large portion of the API server traffic. I think that has been reduced with the new work in the secret manager, but they actually take up the service account token secrets actually take up a ton of space in etcd. We duplicate the CA certificate per namespace or per service account secret, and it's a tremendous portion of the total storage of the API server. So those are the main issues that we're trying to solve with a different form of distributing service account tokens. This proposal proposes a new service account token projection, which will source tokens from this new token request API. The goal is to maintain backwards compatibility with the current service account token volumes or the service account token secrets, so that we can transparently over a few releases phase out the old service account volumes and replace them with a projected volume source with the service account token projection for the service account token, and a config map projection for the CA cert. So that's the motivation. The design is fairly straightforward. The node will make requests make token requests on behalf of pods and inject them through the token projection. So
the part that's a little confusing to me here is we already have a secret volume, a downward API volume, and a config map volume. Is this new volume source, it's going to be injecting a token? That part makes sense to me, but it sounds like it's also going to be injecting a secret downward API or config map?
No, we are using the config map volume source to project the config map projection to inject the CA cert. So
okay.
if you see right here, this is meant to be a fully compatible replacement for the service account, the secret volumes that we have right now. The service account token projection is responsible for injecting the token, and a config map projection will be responsible for injecting the CA cert.
And that'll just use the existing config map volume.
Correct.
Okay.
With one slight modification, I think the current config map projection is useful today, and it gets us halfway there. Since the config map projection uses a local object reference, it cannot cross namespace boundaries. There's a very long outstanding issue to solve authorization for cross namespace config map and secret references. I think that it is a generally useful feature, but I think it's going to take some work to solve generally. Hence why it's been such a long-standing issue. So I think that potentially this proposal could be broken up into two separate changes. One is highlighted in this paragraph to support cross namespace config map references generally, and the other is to actually implement the service account token projection. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
So is this basically making like a special config map key that is this token?
No, so the token is actually never persisted in etcd. The service account token is created by the API server during a token request and returns to the kubelet, and the API server promptly forgets about it.
So like in this config map, there's like a key ca.cert. Is that like a fixed name that you must use?
No, this is an actual config map in the kube public namespace. So this isn't a special placeholder or anything. This is a reference to an actual config map. The key difference between, what is not expressible today in the current config map projection is this cross namespace reference.
Okay, so then how does the token get linked to this?
The token is basically completely separate. So this is the CA cert that we sign all our certificates in the cluster with. So this CA cert signs the API server certificate. So I think it might be good to give a little background on the current service account token secret volume. What we put in it is a token and a CA cert. The token allows a client to the API server to authenticate to the API server, and the CA cert allows the client to verify the authenticity of the server. So we have a mutual authentication. where the CA cert provides trust of the server TLS certificate. So we can distribute the CA cert part with a config map, which makes sense. And the CA cert isn't confidential. The token is confidential. So that's why we had opted to use the secret initially.
But the problem with the secret was that it didn't have the expiration logic built in, and this will.
Correct. Plus, it required storing the secret, or it required storing the authentication credentials in etcd, which is not necessary, and just increases the exposure of the secret. So,
okay. Does anybody have any questions on this design? All right, cool. Then we'll take it offline. And in terms of timeline, are you looking for just approval of the design this quarter, or do you want to actually implement it as well?
I'd love to get as far as possible. I have a prototype that implements only the service account token projection.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of folks working on it, it sounds like you or someone from your team is going to be working on this in collaboration with people on our team reviewing it?
Yes, we'd appreciate review bandwidth and for both the design and the implementation.
Okay, so we have a spreadsheet that we use to track work. We'll go ahead and add this to that spreadsheet. And then from our end, is anybody interested in helping review this? Okay, I can sign up to help review that then.
Awesome, thanks so much.
We'll track this offline. Cool. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, we've got 15 minutes left. I think a lot of the items we have on the agenda may get punted to next quarter or to the next meeting in 2 weeks. Michelle, do you want to talk about this now or at the next meeting?
I guess basically if you're interested in this, take a look at the issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of PRs that need attention. Really briefly, Ian, could you summarize your PR?
Yeah, so presently there's utils, there's a mount unsupported in utils that is used especially during unit testing, but also for any unsupported platform. And presently all the methods in there, none of them return errors. And so anyone who's using those may get an indicator that things are working fine for them because they're not returning errors. And so what this does is it returns errors appropriately for any unsupported platform. So I put this in a few weeks ago. I mentioned you, Saad, Human. Everything looks good, to me, and I just want to make sure you guys take a look at it.
Cool. So yeah, this sounds like a good idea to me. What scares me is there might be things that we may potentially break, even though this is the right thing to do. So what I'd like to do is get this merged early in the quarter and see who screams, and go forward with that. Jan, do you have any bandwidth to take a look at this? Is Jan on the line?
Yeah, sure. I can look at it.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, any advice about where it would break? I kind of tried to think through it, and I think anyone who actually is leveraging this is on an unsupported platform, and therefore really should be knowing or may already know.
Yeah, makes sense.
I talked with
the
team, and they said they haven't really started working on a lot of the plugin support, so they don't have anything that would be broken.
What causes a mount unsupported? Is that like the mount command's not there, or the driver's not on the host? Or?
The mounting commands are not supported on that particular platform. So as an example, for Linux is a supported platform. There's some stuff there for Windows, and there's nothing there for Darwin or Mac OS X.
Okay, I got you.
I wonder if ARM platforms might choke. There's people running Kubernetes on ARM, but I don't think they should be doing mounts. I don't know.
But they run Linux, so they are fine.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, let's keep moving along. Next up is private mount propagation. So Jan sent out an email about this earlier this week. Mount propagation went to beta this past quarter in 1.10. It's been causing a lot of regressions because it changed the default mount mode to rslave. The proposal here is to switch the default back to private and add in another mount propagation mode, which is none. Jan, do you want to talk about this real quick?
This is just a heads up for those who use mount propagation. If you don't use mount propagation or don't care about it, then you can ignore it. If you use shared mount propagation, again, nothing changes for you. But if you depend on slave mount propagation, which was default in 1.10, then we are going to change it back to private in 1.10 dot something because it costs regressions. So just stay alert, and you will see in release notes that we switch it back to private.
Cool. Thanks a lot for
Of
that.
course, reviews are welcome.
Please take a look at that PR if you're interested in this at all.
We would like to change this quickly, though, right?
Yes.
To fix the regressions.
Right. We want to get this out into 10 point, hopefully 1.
I think 1 has already gone out.
Okay. 10.2. I'm going to skip over the planning spreadsheet today because we're short on time. So we'll go on to the next item, which is SIG Storage Projects and Processes by Karen and Brad. Go ahead, guys.
All right. I was going to walk through the sheet and talk about ownership of each one of these projects, but I don't think we have time to do that.
Okay.
Karen, it looks like that you want to add or propose a project for SIG storage. Is that accurate, or maybe a couple projects?
Yeah. For the external storage, this Excel sheet, I added myself as a owner for OpenEBS. But my question was also related to there used to be a process called, to add new projects into Kubernetes incubator, like the way node problem detector, node feature discovery, etc. came up. But this document now says that that's deprecated and we have to use sub-projects. And it looks like this needs to go through the SIG storage team to add new projects, add relevant projects. I was not able to find the process for that.
So the process, as I understand it, is, well, going forward from the old process, is to send out kind of a proposal for the project, and then the SIG votes on adding it, given enough information about ownership and maintenance.
Okay.
And then we'll have a SIG, there's a Kubernetes SIG's repository where we move SIG-specific projects for incubation. Now, if this is something that you want to get in right away, if it's something that's super critical, we're still using that external storage repository to incubate things. But our future direction is to move stuff to the SIG storage organization.
So right now I'm still prototyping and I'm at the design stage of this one. And I just wanted to bring this up in this team to talk about this project. It may take like 5 minutes to walk through what this node disk manager is about. The motivation is really that Kubernetes issue with 58569 that's specific to how do we develop hyper-converged storage solutions. Do we want to go through that now, or?
Since we're short on time in this meeting, how about setting up some time in a future meeting where you can have maybe 10, 15 minutes to go through it?
That sounds good, Saad.
Cool. All right. Anything else you want to add to this?
Oh, no, I'm good. I think talking about it in the next meeting will be good.
You could set a one-off for next week. That's not without precedent. So if you feel like the design is something big enough that it needs a full hour, like you could schedule something and anybody on the SIG could attend. Just send the invite to the SIG working group.
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah. Thanks, Brad.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and finally, we have discussions about the next face-to-face meeting. Steve, do you want to talk about this?
Sure. I've moved employers to VMware, and I've gotten them to host the upcoming SIG meeting. We're still trying. It turned out that they didn't have a venue on campus, so somebody in the organization went out to get a location outside. They've got one lined up, but somebody's got to go sign some paperwork and things. So I didn't put out the actual address yet, just in case it gets moved to an alternate, but it's tentatively at a location in Mountain View. I do have the budget to host this. So for purposes of booking air travel for those who are traveling or getting a hotel, I think it's solid. You know, just get something in the Mountain View, Palo Alto area. You should be fine. I would like to invite, if somebody else wants to help out with hosting meals. Traditionally, for those who haven't gone before, we've held a dinner, and I don't have the budget to host the dinner this time around. So reaching out if any other organizations might want to do it. Worst case is we just all go and self-host our own dinners. And we'll pick a venue for that later. So I'm hoping to get the details with an actual address out by end of day tomorrow. Maybe it'll even be end of day today, but it'll be out soon.
Cool. And so keep an eye out for the document from Steve. You'll be able to start RSVPing in there. And then if you're interested in helping sponsor this event, these events can get pretty expensive. Please put your name or organization down here, and Steve will reach out to you and help sort that out. All right.
Thanks,
thank you, Steve. Last item, Erin Boyd was not able to be with us today. She has a conflict, but she wanted me to mention that she is organizing the SIG onboarding sessions that we discussed last month. I believe Scott Carilli is on the line and may be able to offer more information here.
Yeah, she sent out, I think, a 3-week ongoing meeting invite, so everyone should have received that. It starts next Thursday, I believe. And the other thing she wanted to bring up, Saad, was she's going to plan on starting the SIG storage end-to-end testing back up again in the second week of May. Just another FYI from her.
That would be awesome. I think given everything that Michelle and Tim were talking about today, this would be a very valuable effort for the SIG. Yep. In terms of the SIG onboarding, it sounds like there's 3 reoccurring meetings.
That's what it's set up for right now, yeah.
Okay. And so how is that going to work? Is the idea that anybody who's interested in learning about how to onboard onto the SIG can just attend these meetings?
Yep, it's completely optional.
Okay.
So anyone who's interested attends, and topics will be probably, you know, dynamic.
It's one of those like no dumb questions type of session, right?
Right.
And the invite was sent to the SIG storage mailing list.
Correct.
And reach out to Scott or Aaron if you are unable to find that.
Yep.
Scott, do you know if there's like presentations planned on these things, or is there going to be topics or agendas, or is it just like an open office hours?
I think the doc. The calendar invite has a document with at least the first 3 sessions, and
Right.
then a list of like additional topics that don't have owners or volunteers.
Yep.
Cool. All right, looking forward to that. If you are new to the SIG and you've been wondering how to get involved, this will be a great opportunity to start to learn. And I think that's all that we have for today. Luckily, we made it with 2 minutes of time. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks and hopefully go over the planning spreadsheet again. If you're working on a feature, please go ahead and update the comment section to give a status update. So for folks who are interested in figuring out what's going on, they can take a look at that before 2 weeks. And that's all I have today. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to discuss?
Thanks to everyone that worked on that security bug. I know that retro, we didn't give it a chance, but that was a lot of hard work.
Absolutely. That was an immense amount of work, and it all happened secretly, and it was a handful of folks who worked on it. So huge thank you for that.
A very quick question. Where can I read the CSI spec, and is there a way to propose changes to it?
Yes. So the CSI spec is hosted at github.com/container-storage interface. This organization is independent of Kubernetes and independent of any particular cluster orchestration system. Inside it, there's a repository called spec, and there is a spec.md file, which basically has the entire specification inside it. If you're interested in contributing to it or making changes, please open up issues or pull requests against that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And if you're interested in getting involved with that community, there's a community repo that lists the meetings for CSI.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah.
All right. I think that's it. Thank you, everyone. All right. Take care.
Thank you.